Hey y'all, today we are going to start talking about relationships between pairs of angles. Just a reminder, the word pair means two, so we're going to talk about the relationship between two angles. And before we do that, we want to talk about how we can name angles. So there are four ways to name angles. Three ways involve letters, another way involves numbers. The first thing to know is that the symbol for angle is this symbol right here. So that means angle. It looks sort of like a less than sign, except the bottom is flat. So let's talk about quickly the structure of what is an angle. So an angle is formed by two rays. So the two sides of this angle are rays. That means they start at one point. So in this case, point B. And then these arrows mean they go off forever. And this point B where the two rays meet is called a vertex. And to me, the vertex is the most important point because that's how we're going to base our name of our angle. So the first way to name an angle is just by using the letter of the vertex. So in this case, the vertex is B, so we can call this angle B. And I'm going to put the angle symbol in front and then the vertex letter. And it's red, angle B. Another way I can use it with letters is by using the one point that is on each side. So in this case, on this ray or this side, there's point A, and on the other ray is point C. And so I can name my angle using those 2 points plus the vertex. Since the vertex is in between A and C, I'm going to make sure when I name it, my vertex letter is between those two letters. So I'm going to call this angle A, B, C. Notice the vertex is in the middle, just like it is in the middle of these three letters. I can also name that the other way, starting with C. Again, B, the vertex, is in the middle. So I can name it using just the vertex letter. I can use one letter from each side with the vertex letter in the middle, and then of course the order doesn't matter. The other way is if we give an angle a label, a numerical label. So here I've labeled this angle inside the angle with a 1, and so I could call this angle 1. Sometimes we like to do that to keep things simple. It's important to be careful though, because if we have more than one angle formed at a vertex, like we do in this one, we have vertex V, and so we have this angle formed. And we also have this other angle formed that has the same vertex V. So we can't name these angles angle V because there's two angles that have vertex V, and so that would become confusing. So we have to be more specific. And I'm going to name the yellow one. I'll use red though. It's easier to see. So I can name the yellow one either angle 3 because there's a 3 inside of it, or I can name it angle MVL. Notice the vertex letter is in the middle. Or I can name it the other way. Maybe I want to start with L and call it LVM. So just be careful that that you use the vertex letter in the middle, and if there are multiple angles sharing a vertex, you don't just use that letter. You have to be more specific, maybe using one of those two. Okay, so now that we know how to name angles, let's talk about relationships between pairs of angles. So again, a pair of angles is two angles. The first type of angle relationship we get are called vertical angles. Those are angles that are formed by lines intersecting like this, and they're the angles that are across from each other. So in this case, angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical angles. And what that means is that they're the same size. So we can say the measure of angle 1, that's how we write that, is equal to the measure of angle 3. Another thing we would say is that they're congruent. When two things are the same, they're angles, and they have the same size, their measures equal. we can say they're congruent. So we could say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. And we show that on our picture by putting these little arcs. That says that they're congruent, they're the same size. So that also means that the measure of angle 2 is equal to the measure of angle 4. Their vertical angles across from each other. So we can say that angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. And I'm going to put 2 arcs in there because those 2 angles are congruent to each other, but they're not congruent to angle 1 and 3. The next relationship is complementary angles. Complementary angles add to 90 degrees. So the measures of the 2 angles would add to 90 degrees. So in this case, if these 2 angles, angle 1 and angle 2, are complementary, we would say the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 is equal to 90. So let's say that angle 1 is 25 degrees. If it's complementary with angle 2, then they have to add to 90, and so angle 2 would be 65 degrees. Those 2 angle measures add to 90. 25 plus 65 is 90. And then the last relationship would be supplementary angles. Supplementary angles add to 180 degrees. So here, if I have these 2 angles, if I say they're supplementary, that means the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 180. So if angle 1 is 45 degrees, then angle 2 is 135 degrees. They need to add to 180 if they're supplementary. A special case of supplementary angles are these 2 angles that are next to each other. When angles share a vertex like this, and they share one side, so angle 2 and angle 1 both share this side, and they share this vertex. Those are called adjacent angles when they're like that. I need to spell it right. And when 2 angles are adjacent and they also together, so their other sides make a straight line. A straight line is 180 degrees. So when 2 angles like this make a straight line and are adjacent, these are called a linear pair. They're a pair of angles, 2 angles that make a line. And so those angles are also supplementary. They'll add to 180 because when you put them together, then they make a 180-degree straight line. So you see linear pairs all the time in geometry, and you always know that those 2 angles should add up to 180. So I want to look at some examples here of how we'll see these angle pairs and how we'll use them and their relationships to find angle measures in pictures. And we're going to be using these angle pairs throughout the year in other areas. So the first thing to do would be to identify the relationship between these angles. So if I look at this first one, I have 2 angles. They're made by 2 lines crossing, this line and this line, and they're across from each other. So these are vertical angles. And what we discussed was that vertical angles have the same measure. They're congruent. Congruent means they're the same size and shape. So they're both angles and they're both the same measure. So if we know one of these angles is 79, then we know the other angle is also 79 degrees. If we look at this next pair of angles, this box right here is means this is a right angle. It means that that is 90 degrees. And so these 2 angles together make 90 degrees, so they're complementary. And complementary angles add to 90 degrees. So this 43 plus this angle B that we're looking for should be equal to 90. And now we just have a simple one-step equation to solve. I'm going to subtract 43 from both sides and figure out that B is 47 degrees. I should circle my answers. And then I'm going to look at this last pair. This last pair, they're adjacent. They share a vertex and a side. And then they make this straight line. So they're a linear pair. And that means that their two angles should add to 180 since they make a straight line together, and straight lines are 180 degrees. So I can say that my angle B plus 136 should be equal to 180. Again, here I just have a simple one-step equation to solve. And I can figure out that B is 44 degrees. So if we can figure out what relationship exists between the two angles, and then we know how those two things should interact, then we can find angle measures. We can take that a step further and we can throw x's in here. We're going to have some algebra involved, but it's the same process. I want to establish what is the relationship. So in this one, we make a 90-degree angle. That means they're complementary. So that means they should add to 180. So just like I added the two angles last time, I'll add these ones. So I'm going to say x minus 12 plus 2x should equal 90. I think I said 180. I'm sorry. They should add to 90. I can combine the x and 2x and get 3x, and then I can solve this equation. I'll add 12. And then I'll divide by 3, and I will get 34. So x is 34. So I established that they were complementary angles because they add to 90. I know the relationship means they should add to 90, and I can use that to write an equation and find x. Similar thing here. This is a linear pair. I have adjacent angles that share a side and a vertex and make a straight line. So these things should add to 180. So 3x plus 2 plus 64 equals 180. I can combine the 2 and 64. I'm going to subtract 66. And then I am going to divide by 3. Don't tell anyone I paused so that I can use my calculator. But that's okay. You can use your calculator if you need it. And so I find that x is 38. So again, I figured out the relationship is a linear pair. I know that linear pairs should add to 180. I can write an equation showing them add to 180, and then I can figure out x. Here in my last one, I have vertical angles. They're across from each other. And what we said earlier was that vertical angles are congruent. They're equal. So I should say that 3x plus 2, that angle should be equal to 74. And so now I can solve this. I can subtract 2. And then I can divide by 3 and get x to be 24. So again, establish the angle relationship. Use how they're related to write an equation. They're equal, so I'm going to say that 3x plus 2 is equal to 74. And then I can just solve for x. So I have 3 problems I want you to try. And since this is the first lesson we're doing, I'm hoping I'm able to pop up a little thing where you can put your answers in. So just type in what the value is for B. You should start by establishing what is the relationship between the pair of angles and how are they related, and then put your answer in. Don't worry, wrong answers are not going to count against you. I just want to see how you do. And then make sure if you have any questions, you bring your questions to class, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. So answer these 3 questions.